Hello, everyone. Welcome to Weekends with Amit. This week, the topic is parenting. I don't know how many of our viewers are parents or aspiring parents. Very difficult. But what is for sure is that we were all at some point in time kids. So, an idea about parenting and whether you are ready for being a parent or not, who knows about tomorrow? And if you don't have a kid of your own, there is always the neighbors. So it is good to have a thorough understanding of parenting just in case. And we have a fantastic discourse, so to speak, on parenting. And today we have Professor Amit Goswami and Dr. Valentina Onisor to discuss about this subject, which I'm sure would appeal to a lot of our audience. So thank you for being on the show, Professor Goswami and Dr. Onisor. This is a subject which is very close to many people's heart. But again, that same question, what's quantum about parenting? So first, over to Dr. or Professor Goswami.
Well, I became interested in parenting not when I was an actual parent to my kids. I was only interested in physics those days. But what happened recently was that I started a movement called quantum activism. This show is part of that movement, of course, in which we try to see if we can integrate the current polarized worldview. One side, materialism, science, scientific side, and the other side, religious dogmas. And materialism, don't doubt it, is also a dogma. Not everything is matter, pretty obvious, but except tell that to the materialist and the media. The media supports materialism completely for no reason at all. There is more money in it. That's the only explanation, and power in it. So, in these circumstances, for a child to grow up properly is very difficult. And I began to notice that it has to be included in a very important part of quantum activism, because if we cannot bring the children up in the civilized way, then there is just no hope for the future. And it is already happening. Already we see that the current generation of the social media addicted kids, they become dumb and dumber, too much information processing, and things are really, really bad. And who encourage this? Parents don't have any time for kids, and so they leave the kids to computer games and social media. That is the easy explanation. But I do not think so, because what gives me hope is that when COVID broke out, many people, many women chose to stay home immediately when they could do their job from home. And it was clear that companies were forced to do that, and they could do that. And it is also interesting that as soon as things became a little normal again, people were vaccinated or whatever, they felt secure. And immediately the company started demanding that people go to office again. Many companies have gone back to old habits. So again, parents are, mother is stuck with that. And we cannot imagine mother without a job anymore. The economy of the family depends on both parents working. And then your child got to be in a daycare uh, for some of the hours. And these are complications that you have to deal with. What is the scope of parenting? There's still enormous scope, because there is still a lot of time. First of all, preschool, pre-kindergarten. Of course, some of that will be taken away too when The new plans that the Democrats are making will begin preschool education probably at 3.5 years, and if that become focused, that's another problem parents have to face. That become focused on developing the 3 R's. It's a bit too early unless there is already a propensity in the child that can happen. But if it doesn't, then children really are not ready for that unless, as I said, they're equipped from special traits they bring from reincarnation. So these are problems that parents have to learn. They don't know. There really is a tremendous lack of knowledge that the child is not born as a machine and it does not grow up to be a machine. Child is born as very much of a human being with a big awareness of the cosmic unity from which we all come, one consciousness. The first few months, child really only put things together with its feeling, just like our mammalian friends do, our pets. A child is very much like that, processes only with feelings. And then only gradually the mental memory capacities grow. And by the time the child reaches 1 year, then only we can say that there is a sense of the mental ego self. Before that, hardly there is any ego because the vital alone does not lead to much ego. But the accompaniment is quantum self, unity. So a child is great for adults to interact with because they immediately become correlated with the child if they pay attention, and one can be happy that way. It adds to the happiness of the child as well, because child, of course, is susceptible to the negative emotional circuits. They are there. So child plays with positive and the negative. Negative can easily dominate if no adult is paying attention, then it does. And that's where the importance of the child care center comes in. If they're not under proper supervision, the child is going to be a negative child later on because of the extra negativity that the child has to put up with. And if mother doesn't pay attention, and then question of father comes in, father must also pay attention and establish that non-local quantum connection with the child. It's all about connectivity. How the child grows up with adequate connectivity in that crucial year. And subsequently, when the quantum connection remains intact because the mental ego is not fully developed yet. That happens not until age 5, 6, or 7. And then there are questions of what happens at 5, 6, or 7 when children are looking for some autonomy. That's a major development. It requires the understanding of the vital body, which is a self in the navel chakra in this case, that we have a built-in capacity from collective unconscious the child has to awaken to. If the child does not awaken to that, it's fairly easy, but what the child has to be allowed to awaken that requires parental approval, parental knowledge, or at least parental appreciation of importance of child developing autonomy. Many parents are so protective, especially of the girl child, that they don't allow her to be autonomous, thinking that she will do frivolous things. No, it's not like that. If the navel chakra does not grow in a girl, she will become forever needy for the male to support her. That kind of culture is not supportable anymore. They have to do jobs, they have to be educated. How can they do that with the navel chakra? So we have very difficult psychological adjustment that gives rise to real psychological problems like anxiety neurosis later on. fear-dominated person, would not be able to take risk, needy. Male child, on the other hand, the father tries to shape too much in his own image. That's not right. He may have come from completely different reincarnational dharma, chosen archetype of pursuit, which will make him happy. He should not be deprived from it by an ignorant male parent. So parenting has taken on new aspects as we begin to understand the human being. Unfortunately, the worldview polarization prevents any new aspect of the human being to come into the school curriculum. So it's the parents' duty to do it because parents can do it, they have the right. And even that, of course, the current governments under socialistic aspirations are taking away to some extent. And the other side is no good. They have dictatorial type of politics in mind. That will not do children any good either. So forget about the politicians' worldview and the regular school making any changes. It's up to the parents. And this is why we need parents to be aware of these things, the importance of developing feeling, developing the chakras, the importance of love, that has circuits also in the collective unconscious in potentiality. They have to be awakened. Then the child will learn some moral development, altruism, and such that we can be good to others. That's a good thing. And others have to be acknowledged. That's a good thing. It's not all me that we learn from excessive attention to negative emotions and also the developing mental ego and also weak navel that leads to narcissism. So all these problems. And of course, there is Valentina who will talk about all the childhood real mental problems like autism, hyperactivity that it can develop if the child is not paying attention. Ishanu?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Now, I was about to ask Dr. Anisar on this, but I have a question before that. We generally feel that potentials are limitless. Still, some of the children do very well. Some of them even become geniuses, and many of them, do not do so well, so to speak, in various parameters. So there is a difference. And then, of course, what Professor Goswami was mentioning, the various kind of problems, ADHD and stuff. So if you could throw light on these areas, it would be great, I think, for the audience.
Right. Me or Amit?
You.
Perfect. Great. So, of course, it is about the meaning and the way it's happening today in this materialistic culture. The emphasis is especially on processing information, not meaning. Okay, and you are just sending your kid to check on internet for this and that. Yeah, you just have to know how to retrieve it. But actually, information in this kind of information is other people's meaning. And what we can find on internet is other people's meaning and not yours. And then another problem is that information is very hard to remember than when you derive the meaning of it yourself. Yeah. So what happens with this information-based approach is that a kid can learn a subject enough to be great in an exam, right? But then he or she will rapidly forget this information. So you have to remember a little, even how to use this internet effectively. Otherwise, all this learning is impaired. So eventually, it is a great educational problem, of course. But since rational thinking, is depending on the accumulated ability to retrieve memory, eventually also the ability of rational thinking will be compromised. And that's how informationally dumbed down people cannot distinguish between this non-rational and irrational when they become even justifiably, rebels against the excessive use of rationalism and become easy victims of various theories. And now, for your question directly, it's about children's heterogeneity, we call it, right? So you know that when we speak about the brain, the hardware, so a lot of it is this part of the brain development is suggesting at the first sight this homogeneity of human beings. Okay, so we humans are the same in a way, and the organs, amygdala, hippocampus, neocortex, all do their basic functions in the same way. So we call it a universal portion of the brain software. Remember, software, hardware, and the brain gives the hardware, which we can use according to the laws that will govern us. And these laws are laws of consciousness, based quantum science. But when we say that there are infinite potentialities for us to explore and take the homeostasis of human living to further heights of, let's say, happiness, intelligence, right? It's these infinite potentialities of archetypal exploration that have to come in, and their representation via the mental and vital to which we refer. So it's again really about learning to also bring that meaning, especially from young age. And so the evolution of the brain's genetic hardware is over, but during evolution of the genes, there was also a simultaneous evolution of the vital software. So, but again, to sum up all these things, the result has been that the current universal software of the human brain is far from perfect. And as Amit just mentioned, the effect of this imperfection of the universal software that influences how we grow our individual personal software that we need to tame, and these major imperfections that define our base level human conditions. So I'll not mention them. He said me-centeredness and all the others, this negative emotional brain circuit and so on, which create barriers to self-exploration. So what during the development of human being from childhood to adult, all these barriers to creativity and to access to consciousness will lead to the development of brain-mind doshas, we call them in Ayurveda. Mental slowness, or like dumbing down, for example, which is likely a contributing cause for autism. Of course, it's a lot more to that. Hyperactivity, which leads to this pathological condition of attention deficit hyperactive disorder, ADHD, and intellectualism that can lead to depression or other pathologies, right? And of course, these negative emotional brain circuits will produce also emotional stress. And if you combine this with the dosha of hyperactivity, this will lead to emotion expression and even heart disease, right? And this emotional stress is suppressed by intellectuals, of course, and this produces the immune system malfunction, which can lead even to cancer and heart disease, and even Alzheimer. Nowadays, there are so much research about that. When you recognize that it's an autoimmune disease. So today it's common for many children to develop this ADHD, and the attention deficit has a lot to do also with this de-emphasis on meaning that is prevalent to our culture, and we have to really address that a lot. Lack of attention is serious business. So when we attend, we are putting our choice in line, and the movement of consciousness goes along with our choice, right? But when we